Okay, welcome to the April 13th Rotary Club of North Texas. Uh, Maybe I could say the 11 too
Well,
sometime.
just, after I finish,
No,
after I finish,
okay.
when we get.
Well,
Okay, wait a minute, somebody wants in.
it, Charlotte,
Hi, Charlotte.
all right, Charlotte's in.
Okay. Oh God, giver of all good, we thank thee for our daily food. May Rotary friends and Rotary ways help us to serve thee and thee all our days and keep everybody healthy and amen.
And
The
pledge,
pledge,
we got a
we
flag
don't
in
have
the
a
room.
pledge, no.
You join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance
Allegiance to
to
the
the
flag
flag
of
of
the
the
United
United
States
States
of
of
America
America
and
and
to
to the
the
republic
republic for
for
which
which
it stands,
one
one
nation
nation, under
under God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with
with
liberty
liberty
and
and
justice
justice
for
for
all.
all.
You can get a flag in the future on YouTube. If you go to YouTube and you go waving flag, then you can put it on the
We
screen.
have flags somewhere.
Well, we did have one last week. Um, it just, we're on one computer and it's hard to do. I guess I could do it from my cell phone. I didn't ring the bell. I forgot the bell.
I rang it.
Did the
Oh,
bell.
Howard did the bell. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Tonight we have our president-elect Howard, our president nominee Charlotte, and David and me. And David wants to say something about something.
Well, we were talking summer in Seattle. They say summer can be very nice, especially if it comes on a weekend where you can get out and enjoy it. Last year, summer was Thursday. So,
So, um, the only thing, Howard, do you want to tell us a little about your experience? Uh,
Yes, when I was doing the president-elect training, a lot of it was just a lot of stuff. But the one thing I took away that I thought would be most useful was how to grow the group. And they mentioned that people who want to join Rotary go to Rotary International. They sign up, and then their information is stored there. And they pointed out, since we're an E Club, we could go to those people and say it doesn't matter where they live, because I'm in Florida, you're in Texas, that they could join the club. And the advantages of the E Club are, one, you can be anywhere. You don't have to buy a meal like all the other clubs, which could cost, as you know, up to $20, $30 a week. You don't have the happy dollars. You save another bundle on that. So you could save a couple of thousand a year in this club over the others. Plus, if you can't make a meeting, you watch the recording and you still get all the benefits of being in the Rotary without having to be there at that time. So it's got a lot of, and they can go to all the meetings of all the other clubs they want to go to as a Rotarian. So what I need to find out from you, Linda, is how to get that list,
okay.
how to find it, and then I thought David and me, we could draft a letter, and we could do, if we do like five possible people a day, both of us, that's 10, that's like 50, 60 people a week. We should be able to get a lot more members into our club that way.
Yeah, I know three people that have indicated they would like to, they have been members in the past in different clubs, and they may be interested in joining us again.
So that was my idea, because we need to get more members. I mean, we have to grow this group a little. So that was what I was going to do. I was going to focus on that, but I didn't want to do that without sharing that with Charlotte and everyone else, because you know it's a group. It's not just me. And if you're doing something, you need everybody's to be on board, or at least the majority on board.
And
So
Joshua, you are always welcome to attend and join us anytime you would like to. You sound like
Did I just hear I'm not getting a meal today?
we got it. You
we
got
got
to
it.
come pick it
Yeah,
up.
yeah,
Oh, good. I'll be right over. I'll be right
Okay.
over.
well, Joshua, I'm a speaker too, and what I was going to say is one of the advantages of being in a Rotary Club is that if you want to speak for Rotary, it's easier to get into a lot of clubs that way. They're always looking for speakers, always.
Yeah, I've spoken to, probably on this topic, I've spoken to probably about a dozen Rotary clubs in the Northeast New England area at this point. This is my first e-club.
Well, the beauty is now everyone's online, and like I've done about 400 clubs, and I'm gonna say even in the last week I've done about 15 clubs on Zoom. So it gives you more traction for now. And if you're traveling as a speaker, you can go to the local club and tell them you're there, and they'll help you get more people show up at your event. There's a lot of advantages from a business side to being in Rotary, but it's also a very good group of people. They do a lot of humanitarian work.
Are you using Twitter and Instagram at all?
Yes, I do. Not the group, but I do.
You should try it too, because anybody under 40 years old, I keep learning, is only communicating through Twitter and Instagram these days. So,
Yeah.
You know, it's one of those things where we all have to adapt if we're going to keep our archaic ways of doing things going.
Yeah, even Facebook, they're not as much involved with that anymore.
Nope, I bailed on Facebook probably about 4 years ago at this point, and because it turns out I just don't care who you voted for, so I have no use for Facebook because I don't want to debate that with you.
Well, most of my people are is Rotary. Like tomorrow, I'm going to a Rotary meeting on Zoom in England.
Oh, cool.
I go to another Rotary club twice a month that's in England. I go to a Rotary club in Houston, usually once or twice a month. And I've gone over to 200 clubs around the world. And
yeah, no, I've been living my life. What I usually do is I go to a lot of libraries and I go to a lot of colleges with my presentation. Some churches too, some other civic groups like Rotary or Lions. But for the last year and a half, I have done over 200 podcasts. And that's where I'm doing all my speaking lately.
Yeah.
Is on the podcast circuit.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way you can really speak to people now is virtually.
Yeah.
And and you know this as a speaker, the nice thing about what I do is I can have 3 hours of material, but I can never host a podcast because I can't come up with new ideas every day or every week. What I can do is I can take the same 3 hours of material, which I think is pretty important, and then go from group to group virtually and spread it that way. And that's what, I tell people it's a lot like being a modern day Johnny Appleseed. You just kind of go to different places and drop your seeds and move on, and drop the seeds and move on.
I don't know if you know about Rotaract. It's the college to up to 40 years. Actually, there's no limit now, but it is college age on up.
I didn't know that.
Yes, it's called Rotaract. And so a lot of Rotaractors can be members of Rotary. So it used to be an age limit of 40, but they've done away with the age.
Well, you could go to Rotary International if you're a member, and you can put in let's say you put in Portland. So charge you the Portland club, and then you go to one club, find out what district they're in. So what you can do is then you could start marketing to every club in the district through Rotary International, and it's a really good way to be able to reach like 60, 70 clubs in a day, and they're not all going to book you. But if you go to 60, 70 clubs a day, you're going to get about 5 to 10, maybe 15 bookings out of that consistently.
So you're saying if I do this, not virtually, but in real time, I can probably travel the country and never pay for a meal.
You don't have to pay for a meal anyway because we don't charge our speakers.
Yeah, exactly. I know. That's what's great is I'll never have to pay on the road, and
I don't see a club in Portland, Maine.
Oh, there's got to be a club in Portland,
I've
Maine.
spoken to. I think there's 2 clubs in Portland.
Oh, wait a
actually.
minute. I think I put in the wrong ME.
Yeah, there's got to be that's a big city. There's got to be multiple clubs there.
Yeah, there's 2 or 3 in Portland. I know where I live. There's one because I've spoken to them a few times.
Guarantee you there's one. Yeah.
Over the years.
I hit ME instead of ME.
Yeah, there's no way there's no
That's
club in
Massachusetts.
Portland.
Yeah, there's no Portland, Massachusetts.
Yeah, Portland, Maine definitely has at least one, and I'm gonna think 3 or 4, maybe even
I've got
more.
a lot of the towns right around it. South
Yeah, the whole area around it is gonna have. So okay, do we have any other business to discuss tonight before we get to the
Charlotte, do you
speaker?
have anything? You can unmute. Charlotte? Okay. There are Portland Sunrise, Portland Cape Elizabeth on a Wednesday. On a Friday, there's the Portland, Maine.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
they're
that makes
three
sense.
together.
That's what I would think.
So there's three. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Charlotte's muted. Oh, there she is. Charlotte, do you have anything to bring us up to date on?
I don't.
And you're gonna stay in the Dallas area?
We just got the inspection for the home in Mobile, and there was a lot more going on than we had been told, so we've got to make a decision.
Oh, okay. Okay.
How are you feeling, and how's your boyfriend
That's
feeling?
all. Aw, thanks for asking. He's doing better. I'm pretty good. He's actually going to the gym. He's been to the gym one time, and it's the second time.
That's
They
good
both
news.
had COVID, 'cause, and Bob was in the hospital for about a month, but this is the second time they had it. So
Okay, well,
Charlotte came through with not as many side effects.
it's everyone's different, you know. Some people, my granddaughter has it, and she didn't even have a fever. Nothing.
Aw.
Zero symptoms. Nothing.
That's amazing.
It's just, and then you get Bob. He's young. He's fit. He's a doctor of holistic health, so you know he's eating right. And he got sick as a dog. It's just hard to. My neighbor has cancer. He's on chemo. He's 93. He had it, and a week later he was in the gardening. So I just don't understand how it's working. Where it's like jumping it's like a tornado. It hits certain spots really badly, and everyone else is like, well, I guess we're okay. I don't understand why it's doing that, but it is.
Yeah.
Well, we haven't studied it yet. We're just trying to stop it.
Yeah, you're
I
right.
think
It's
once we study it, we're gonna find some connections.
Genetic
that we just
somewhere.
Don't see now.
Yeah, there's
we're gonna
definitely a
find something.
genetic component to. Because you see a family of 4 and they all died, and then you get like 10 people in a family you don't even know they're sick. So it's telling you there's something in that family of 4 they all had that made them extra ripe for that disease. Something's
20
going on.
years from now, we're gonna understand this thing.
Hopefully, I don't know. 20 years from now, I'll be 92, so I don't know if I have to worry about that. But I have other things on my plate. Like, do I have a plate? Do I have teeth? Am I breathing?
Just shoot for not being in diapers. Just
Yeah, that would be
for
great.
diapers.
That would be great. I'm almost there now. So, you want me to start introducing the speaker? Are we ready for the speaker?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Joshua is someone I met through a podcasting site, and he specializes in pornography addiction. Not how to get addicted, but how to get unaddicted, and some of the effects of pornography addiction. So I thought it would be an interesting topic, a little different than some of what we've done in the past, and I thought he would be a good speaker, and I'm sure we'll enjoy his presentation. I'm going to mute myself while you're talking so you don't get any background noise, but when you're done, I'll unmute.
And then if
How
you
many
record,
minutes do you want me to go?
I would say 20 to 30 would be perfect.
Okay. Okay. Do you want to do a Q&A at the end or just?
Yeah, that's what we usually do.
Okay.
But I find, because I have a dog and he might start barking, if I walk away, it's because he needs to go out, but I'm not going anywhere.
You'll probably hear barking on my end too.
That's-
We are. I have 2 adult dogs, and we are fostering 2 puppies right
So
now.
you know, when they bark to go out, you better take them or you wish you had.
Yeah, we will hope that my wife is still alive and they haven't gotten to her yet, and she will put them out so I don't have to. But if you hear puppies or dogs on my end, don't worry. I know they're here. I'm just ignoring them. So yeah, I'll be happy to start. My name is Joshua Shea. I am 45 years old. I was born here in Lewiston, Maine. I live next door in Auburn now. In between, I've spent time living in the Portland, Maine area. I lived in the Boston area, Rhode Island. Probably the most interesting place I ever lived for about 8 months back in 1998 was in Tokyo, Japan. I worked for a newspaper there that went to the troops called Stars and Stripes. Anybody who was in the military that has served either in Europe or in Asia has probably seen Stars and Stripes at one time. That's what ended up bringing me to Japan. I am a journalist by trade. I stumbled into it one day after school, my junior year of high school, and I, for the most part, never looked back. I worked for daily newspapers, I worked for commercial press, business to business publications, and the last thing that I ever did commercially was I actually owned my own magazine here in Maine. For my general area, it was one of those lifestyle magazines that deals with dining and food and whatnot. But my entire professional life, most people didn't realize that I had a secret, and that was the fact that I was a pornography addict. Um, to go back to the beginning, I am very textbook when it comes to who pornography addicts are when it comes to American males. The guru godfather of this study area is named Dr. Patrick Carnes, if you want to look anything up. He was the first person who was studying sex addiction, porn addiction, and this area long before the internet, long before people were getting wise to the fact that this is actually a real addiction. What he found in his study, those men who are addicted to pornography, and I'll get into the definition of addiction in a minute, those who are addicted, 70% of them in their childhood had some kind of physical abuse take place. 80% had some kind of sexual abuse take place, and over 90% had some sort of mental or emotional abuse take place. So when you're talking about American men who have pornography addiction, it is almost always the case that they have a background that involves some kind of abuse. And out of that abuse grows trauma, and that trauma gets pushed down, that trauma is not dealt with, and it becomes unresolved. In a lot of cases, it basically gets forgotten as an actual thing that happened, since it happened when people were so young. Between the ages of 3 and 6 years old, I was taken care of by a babysitter when my parents were at school. She, I can look back upon, was a very ill woman who hid it well, but she was not well, and both myself and my brother, along with 2 or 3 other kids who were taken care of there, all under the age of 6 or 7, we were unfortunately victims of both sexual abuse and mental emotional abuse. And like the statistics often say, because I was a little kid, I didn't have a way to process that trauma. I just pushed it down. One of the things that happens when you're a child and you develop the tendencies of addiction, and this is true across every addiction, whether it's alcohol or drugs or video games or sex, gambling, whatever it is, most of the wires are connected when you're young. And when I was young, because of what was happening around me, I developed survival skills and coping skills that aren't exactly the ones that, while they may work for a 5-year-old boy, they don't work for a 25-year-old man or a 45-year-old man, yet they were the ones that I held on to. I could not evolve, I could not grow emotionally because I got stuck in this place. So luckily I got away from this woman when I was around 6 years old. Went on to live my life. Around 12 years old, my cousin, an older boy, he showed me hardcore pornography for the first time. Now, I can't tell you what the magazines were named, I can't even tell you what was on the page, but when I saw them, something changed in me. I didn't develop an addiction. I had an addiction the moment that I saw pornography for the first time at 12. It was like some kind of warmth came over me. It was like I felt better. I felt like I had found a tool in life that was going to make things better. The only other time I've ever felt this, and when people say that they think that pornography addiction isn't real, I bring up the fact that the only other time I've ever had this in the moment feeling like this was 2 years later, at 14 years old, when I went to a wedding and I got drunk for the first time. They had left champagne at tables that were unattended, or people didn't sit there. So a little precocious 14-year-old, I went around and I started drinking them. 7 or 8 of them in a few minutes, and suddenly I started to recognize, oh my goodness, I feel great. I feel warm. And I'm 14 years old, but here I am thinking, I'm a better dancer. I'm funnier. I'm better looking. All of those things that those of us who have ever got tipsy or drunk tend to feel. But I love this feeling. This made me feel better than who Joshua Shea was in real life. So right around this time, and we're going back now, this is about 1987, 1988. If you'll remember, Blockbuster, Movie Gallery, these big video stores, they were starting to take over from the mom and pops. The mom and pops had to do whatever they could do to stay in business. So after school one day, when I was probably a freshman in high school, I rode my bike to the local video store. And I'm a huge fan of movies. I can quote movies from the 30s all the way up to ones that were released last week. I would rent movies there regularly. They knew me. One day, I don't know what it was, I got up the guts to walk to the back room, the one that had the swinging saloon doors that, you know, very ominous. And I walked in, I was in there for 2 seconds, and I grabbed 2 videotapes, and I went to the counter, and they allowed me to take them. And it was, wow. I felt so empowered. I rode my bike just about 2 blocks away to the convenience store where it was rumored that they sold kids beer. So I walked in there, and I didn't, again, me being, you know, neurotic, even as a teenager, I didn't have the guts to get a 6-pack. I had to take 4 bottles of beer and bring them up to the counter. I guess that made me look more professional. I don't know what was going on in my head. But I brought up the 4 bottles, and they sold them to me. And there I was riding home after school on my bike with beer bottles clinging in my backpack and a couple of pornography videos in my backpack. For the next 4 or 5 years, up until moving away to college, unless I was working or unless I had some kind of activity after school, my routine was the same. I would go to the video store, I would rent 2 pornographic videos, I would go to the convenience store, and I would buy 4 beers. And I would go home. My parents weren't home yet. I had a VCR in my room because I was such a big movie fan. I would watch one of the pornos and drink 2 of the beers, and then my parents would come home. They were school teachers, and we would have our normal evening together, whatever. I would do my homework. They went to bed about 9 o'clock. Once I was sure they were asleep about 10, I put in the other porno video. I drank the other 2 beers. That was my routine for many, many years. Once I was 18, 19 years old, I went to college. That didn't stick too long. I ended up in my own apartment because I got a great job working in the news industry. I have been, like I said, I have been very lucky in that way, where the opportunities I've had in the news industry are ones that most people have to go to college to get, have to go to grad school to get. And I've been very lucky that people have given me opportunities along the way. So I was living on my own at 21. I had a great job, and the internet comes along, and I never had to look at another magazine or another video ever again. And this was back in the days of the screeching modem, and where it sounded like a fax machine, and it would take 3-4 minutes to download a photo. But this was amazing because I could do it from the comfort of my home, and you know, and I still, you know, after 14 years old, I never had a problem getting alcohol anywhere. And unfortunately, most places still don't card. But I can tell you that whether I was in high school or the short time I was in college, whether I was at the start of my career or whether I was towards the pinnacle of it before I kind of moved away from this stuff, whether I was dating a girl or whether I was engaged or whether I was married, whether I had kids or not, didn't matter where I lived. The only 2 things that I could count on in my life from age 12 to age 36, 37 were pornography and alcohol. And they did largely the exact same things for me. Most people don't realize this, but you can be largely addicted to just about anything. You know, food addiction doesn't take place in the stomach. Gambling addiction doesn't take place in the wallet. And porn addiction doesn't take place between the legs. Addiction all takes place between the ears. It's all in the mind. Addiction to addiction to addiction, whether it's, like I said, gambling, cocaine, heroin, pornography, it doesn't matter. 95% of addiction is exactly the same on a chemical level in your brain. You are basically doing a stimulation of your pleasure centers. And there are 6 different chemicals in there. I'm not going to get all technical about it, but you see the same thing from addiction to addiction to addiction. Obviously, different addictions have different side effects. If you're a food addict, you're going to gain a lot of weight. If you're a gambling addict, you might lose your kid's college fund. They all are different, but they are all very much the same. So that's important to recognize. As far as addiction goes, statistics with porn addiction are pretty sad, especially for younger groups. There was a fantastic study that came out, and keep in mind, all of my statistics are pre-pandemic. I'll talk a little bit about the pandemic in a couple minutes, but I do want you to know these are before the pandemic, so all of these are probably low. The biggest, scariest statistic that I can give you is there was a group in Texas, actually, called the Barna Group. They're a consulting firm. They were hired by an organization called Covenant Eyes to do a study on pornography use among Americans. And they interviewed thousands of people. This is one of the best studies that's ever been done on pornography. I think it was 2017, might have been 18, but you can find it online. Among 18 to 30-year-old males, essentially any man under 30 years old, 32% reported that they either looked at too much pornography, they believed that they were developing a problem with pornography, they had a problem with pornography, or they believed they had a full-blown addiction. Now, it is self-diagnosis, so it's not perfect, but the fact that 1 out of 3 men between 18 and 30 years old thought they had their behavior with pornography rose to the level of an issue should scare a lot of people out there. Other statistics that'll raise your eyebrows a bit. When you're talking about men under 50 years old, 80% look at pornography at least once a month. Perhaps even more surprising, when it comes to women under 50 years old, 60% look at pornography at least once a month. Many of these people look multiple times a day. If you are looking across all men and all women of all age groups, the most recent statistics, 2016, 2017, that we can count on, say that between 17 and 18% of the total population falls into the category of being addicted to pornography. So we have to ask, what is addiction? Aside from what's going on in your mind, addiction, there are multiple symptoms. First is that despite understanding there are negative consequences, you can't stop a behavior. Whether that's looking at porn, whether that's playing video games, whether that's smoking, whether that's drinking, it doesn't matter. You understand that there are drawbacks to your behavior, but you can't stop. Another big symptom is that you plan your entire day around this activity. I've talked with people who will drive 2 hours each way to go to a casino that they only spend 30 minutes at because they have that draw. What are they missing in that 4 hours? Maybe time with their kids, maybe time with friends. They're missing other activities. And that's another big symptom of addiction of all kinds, is that you put your addiction in front of activities that were once more important to you, like time with your family, like hobbies. And again, with the negative effects, this isn't necessarily that because you are a food addict, you are going to die of heart failure, or because you're a gambling addict, you're going to go bankrupt. This is the fact that you are staying up till 2 or 3 in the morning to engage in your addiction, so you only get 3 hours of sleep at night, and you go to work feeling less than 100%, so you put in a less than 100%. If you are thinking all the time about your addiction and how you're going to get to it and how you're going to hide it from other people, you may not be there fully present for your kids, for your grandkids. Perhaps the biggest indication, though, of addiction is when you make yourself promises about the behavior that you understand is having negative effects in your life, but you cannot keep those promises to yourself. For instance, with addiction of pornography, it could be that I am going to look at pornography for 30 minutes on the computer, and suddenly 3 hours later, you are still there. With gambling, I'm going to go and I'm only going to spend $200. $500 later, you're still trying to get back to only losing $200. That's what addiction does to you. It tells you stories. It takes over your brain. It makes you have these impulses and these beliefs. And just, it's like a moth to a flame. For anybody who is listening on the video of this, I'll give you a great example if you want to experience or witness addiction if you never have in your life. Take your smartphone tomorrow, get a Post-it note, put it across the front of your phone, and then turn the volume up. Every text, every Instagram, every ding, every beep, turn the volume all the way up, and then put the phone next to you. Those of us who are older don't have as much of a problem with this, but it's really fun to watch 20-year-olds do this. Put it next to them, and then there's going to be a buzz. Maybe somebody texted them, but they can't look at it because you've got the Post-it note there. Then a few minutes later, maybe there's another buzz and it's a text. And a few minutes later, there's a chime and somebody liked one of their photos on Instagram or liked one of their tweets. What happens with people in regular life, in the real world, is we don't realize we're addicted to our phones. So when you look, especially the younger people who live on them, most people who actually try this, they last about 2 hours or they last about 6 notifications, and then they take their phone and they rip it off and they start going and find out what they missed. It's people who wake up in the morning and the first thing they do is they look at their phone. They wake up in the middle of the night and they see if anybody sent them a message. We can talk about exactly what kind of addictions those are, but that is a perfect example of addiction. That telephone is running your life. Obviously, being addicted to a telephone is not 1/50th as bad as a drug or a harmful behavior, but it shows you how the mind thinks. When you are drawn like a moth to a flame, that is addiction. If it was just as easy as, people who say, well, just stop doing it. It's just not that easy, and that's why the 12 steps are so huge. That's why the world of coaching and therapy is so huge. Addiction is not an easy thing to kick. I ended up in the, when would this have been? This would have been about 2012, 2013. At that point in time, I was very, very overwhelmed. I was the publisher of a local magazine or regional magazine. I had also created a film festival as an offshoot of the magazine that grew into this other monster. It was a yearly international film festival here in Maine, and that was getting a ton of attention. And at that point, I was also a local politician on my city council. I was doing all of these things because my porn use and my drinking were getting worse and worse. I loved to play publisher writer guy. I loved to play politician guy. I loved to go to Rotary events and speak. I loved to talk to anybody I could. But when I got home and my wife went to sleep and my 2 kids went to sleep, what was left? It was just me, Joshua Shea, by himself, sitting on the couch. And that was the most difficult thing for me to do, was just to sit in my own company. Because deep down, I knew who I was. Deep down, I knew how flawed I was. I knew how broken I was. I didn't hide the drinking super well from people, but I hid the pornography very, very well from people. So instead of sitting there in my feelings, I would go to the fridge, get a big bottle of tequila and a Red Bull, mix them together, and then sit down at the on the couch with my laptop and start looking at pornography. In my recovery, I've learned that the alcohol was mostly about just numbing myself, kind of like having raw nerve endings. And the alcohol, again, most of us have drank at some point, most of us have been drunk or felt it at least at some point, it sort of dulls the nerve endings. With pornography, however, that was a completely different beast. That was about control. And if you think about this, it makes sense. And it makes sense why, of all the different addictions you could be in the world, I ended up with pornography. Because as a kid, I was being violated sexually, I was being treated horribly, and at some point at that time, I likely promised myself I would never give up control to anybody else. That's why when I've run companies, I've been accused of being a bit of a micromanager. Uh, that's why I've always owned my own companies. I don't want to take direction from other people. I don't want to have people tell me what I have to do. I'm very independent. I want to make my own calls. One of the reasons college didn't work was because I don't like sitting in a classroom. I would rather spend 5 years learning something in the field than 1 year learning it in the classroom. That's how I'm built. And again, I think that's about control. I promised myself as a kid I would never give control up to anybody else again. When you think about pornography, when you open the page of that magazine or you look online, you are the master of the universe. If I want to see a woman with blonde hair, I've got it. If I want to see a woman with dark hair, I've got it. Any ethnicity, any amount of people, anything weird I can come up with, it's probably out there on the internet and I can find it. But more importantly, when I find it, the person on the other side of that computer screen, they're not going to say, no, I don't want to talk to you. No, I don't want you to be here. They're just going to be there for me. And if I get tired of them, I hit the button and I find somebody else. And again, nobody there is telling me, oh, Josh, you got to take the trash out. Or Daddy, come help us. Or you're not doing a good job at work today. Nobody's nagging me. Nobody's bothering me. I am the center of the universe. And because it does involve sex, because it does involve certain bodily functions of sex, it is pleasurable, and there is that pleasure release. And I think that that was really why I ended up addicted to pornography. Anyway, with all of these different balls I had juggling professionally, things started to get tougher and tougher to manage because I essentially had three full-time jobs. The magazine started to get rough. In 2013, we'd been around for about 5 years. Our revenues were plateauing. It was a huge success when it started, but our revenues after 5 years were plateauing. We weren't the brand new cool thing in our area anymore. Some advertisers found that they could use their money elsewhere and get a bigger return on their investment. So for the first time ever, we plateaued, and in some cases, we even started to decline a little bit in revenue. However, because I'm not a good business person, you can throw a ton of money at me and I can hide the fact that I'm not a good business person, but when money is tight, unfortunately, I fail. And it's happened time and time again with business. I started failing, and for the first time, I had a very large business. It wasn't just one employee, or it wasn't just me. I had about 7, 8 people under me. We were talking about multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars in contracts for advertising. There was a portion of that were already guaranteed in subscriptions. So I was just going, batty, trying to figure things out. And it took such a toll on me that I made a horrible decision, and I pulled myself off of my bipolar medication. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder around the age of 20, and it took a long time to get the proper diagnosis because mania was my regular way of being. I very rarely ever got depressed. I was manic all the time, and I thought that was just normal. When I was 22, 23, and I was put on the proper medication, I adjusted, and there was really nothing very dramatic about it at all. People who have bipolar disorder often at some point start to think that they are cured. They start to think of bipolar disorder as something like a broken leg that you eventually get cured from. It's not. It's more something like diabetes is something you maintain your entire life and you take care of your entire life. I told myself when this was in 2013, if I pulled myself off of my bipolar medication, that I would be able to tap into creativity that I wasn't getting to. I would be able to have a couple extra hours being awake every night to figure out how to turn things around at the magazine. Unfortunately, what happened was after about 2 weeks of doing this and the medication got out of my system, I started to spike with my addictions. Instead of just drinking at social events or in the evening when I was home by myself, I was drinking multiple times a day. I made sure that there was always beer at lunch. I made sure that, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock meetings were always happy hour meetings held at a brew pub near my office. I looked for any opportunity I could drink possible. With pornography, which I looked at almost every day, late at night, probably 30 minutes to an hour every night, that suddenly became 2, 3, 4 hours. I even started going into chat rooms and chatting up different women in these rooms. Things that I would never do before because I wasn't properly medicated. I was just absolutely going off the rails. Finally, in March of 2014, I was essentially shoved by my family and some close friends into rehab. They didn't know that I had a pornography addiction of any real size, but they knew that I had a major drinking problem, that my drinking was out of control. So they sent me out, kicking and screaming. They sent me out to Palm Springs, California, where I figured I will fake my way through this rehab center. And thank God, after about 7 days, a light went on, and it was like, oh my goodness, I am the person they are talking about. I am absolutely the person they are talking about. I'm the alcoholic they're talking about. Instead of being there 28 days like you see in the movies, I ended up being there 69 days. And because I had some real issues, and there are a lot of issues that come with addiction that I didn't understand. Um, in my last few weeks there, I was dealing with my caseworker, and wonderful man. He helped me recognize that I had some issues surrounding sexuality, surrounding my sexual attitudes, surrounding pornography, and he had me meet with a certified sex addiction therapist that he knew off campus. Ironically, this guy was the one who developed the sex offender system for the country of New Zealand. As it turned out, he'd been on all of these different CNN and Dr. Drew and all these other shows. So I was dealing with one of the best in the country. I only got to see him for about 6 weeks, but he helped me realize that my pornography use was not just a poor decision based on being drunk. My pornography addiction predated my alcoholism, and it was actually worse than my alcoholism. And he helped me start to uncover some of those memories of the abuse that I suffered at the babysitter's house when I was a kid, and how some of those incidents helped form my belief system and my coping skills and my ways of surviving and my attitudes towards getting through every day. I was the stereotypical guy who I didn't ask permission to do something. I just said sorry after the fact. And because I was an addict, and all addicts are masters of deceit, masters of manipulation, most addicts are very charming people, I could always charm my way out of bad situations by smiling and making jokes, and usually I got away with it. I ended up coming back home to Maine. I went into very deep therapy with the woman who I still see about once a month. Back then, I was seeing her twice a week, 2 hours a session, and we started to get into the pornography addiction. We started to get into some of the stuff that happened to me when I was younger. Me being a journalist, me being a guy who loves research, I went to a bookstore, if you still remember what those used to be. I went to a bookstore that was in my town, and I went to their medical section, or I think it was their self-help section, and I looked for the books on addiction. There were several books just on general addiction. There was a lot of books on alcoholism. There was one book on sex addiction, but it was about what I refer to as intercourse addiction. It wasn't about pornography. And intercourse addiction, never my issue. I've been married now. Next month it'll be 18 years. I've never cheated on my wife once in a physical way with anybody. There's a big difference between intercourse addiction and porn addiction. I didn't go that way. But there was nothing about pornography addiction there. And it kind of bugged me because while I'm good with sitting down and reading the New England Journal of Medicine or some of these very academic texts, I know the average person doesn't like to sit down and read those things. It's like reading Shakespeare. You have to translate them. So I spent about a year just learning about pornography addiction, reading all of these old studies, learning about addiction in general with the other books, and I decided that I was going to write my first book. That book came out in 2018. As I was deciding I was going to write this book, my therapist thought that it would be a good idea for me to go to actually get some one-on-one therapy in a rehabilitation setting for my pornography addiction. So I ended up going to Texas. I went to a place called the Sante Center, which is in Argyle, Texas, just a little ways down the road from Dallas, a little ways down the road from Denton. And I ended up spending 7 weeks there. Even though I hadn't looked at pornography in well over a year at that point, it was hugely important for me to be there to understand how I became the person I was. And that was the place where it occurred to me what addiction really is. Addiction is never the main problem. Addiction is a symptom of a bigger problem. In most cases, the problem is unresolved trauma from childhood based on some kind of abuse. It doesn't have to be that. For instance, there are people who have trauma because they witnessed somebody dying in front of them, or they witnessed, a pet dying. There are people who have trauma because they moved from one side of the country to the other when they were a kid, and they just never processed it. There are also people with trauma because of what other people did to them. I actually deal with a lot of these people in my personal coaching I do now. That's known as betrayal trauma. And a lot of partners of pornography addicts have to deal with that when they find out that their partner is an addict. But anyway, I went to this rehab, and then when I got out, I decided I am going to write this book. I spent almost the next 2 years writing it. It came out, it did okay, but then I started to be asked to do lots of podcasts. And what was fascinating was I thought that I would get interviews, or not interviews, but I would get inquiries from porn addicts who might want some help. I got some of those, but what I got more of was the partners or the friends or the parents of porn addicts saying, "You got better, what can I do for my loved one?" Or, "It's killing me that my husband is a porn addict. I feel like I'm not enough in the bedroom, or I'm not pretty enough, or whatnot." And I'll just, as an aside, that's never the case. If you have someone who's a porn addict in your life, it's their issue, not yours. But that was when I realized just how much helping people with this was important to me, and how nobody out there knows anything about this. We are still a very puritanical society. I've been talking now probably too long, but I have not been super graphic about pornography in my talk here. I never am. We don't have to be. But we have to recognize that, like I said, 80% of men under 50 use porn at least once a month. 60% of women do. When you look at the under 30 group, the ones that grew up with the internet, they don't remember, you now have to be over 30 to remember a world before the internet. These people, they weren't like, you or I that had to stumble on a magazine or find a video. We give every 12-year-old the greatest pornography computer that's ever been invented, and we just hand it to them and say good luck. And we don't teach them how to use it. It's a sad thing, but in 2021, we need to sit and talk to our kids about pornography in a very age-appropriate, non-graphic manner if we're going to get this under control. Because think about this. If 1/3 of men under 30 have issues with pornography, if they don't take care of this, those men will one day be 40, and then 50, and then 60. What happens when we have 1/3 of the men in this country sexually unhealthy because of pornography? What happens when we have 1/5 of the women in this country unhealthy because of pornography? That's going to be a very sad society. So we need to start talking about this. Like I said, it's sad that we have to do it, but we can do it in age-appropriate ways. You know what? In the 1950s, we had to do air raid drills. We don't have to do that anymore. Our kids would laugh about it if we tell them about it. But times change. This is where we live now, and we need to be able to stop talking about pornography as adults, because without the ability to talk about pornography as an entity that is throughout society, we are never going to be able to talk about pornography addiction and how to help people with it. So that's my spiel. I want to thank Howard for inviting me to come speak to you. If anybody wants to know anything specifically, you can find my website. It is the letter P, addictrecovery.com. And there are a ton of resources there. It also will link you to my coaching. It'll link you to my books. They're also available on Amazon. I've created an online course for people who are partners of porn addicts. There's a lot there, and you can always reach me one-on-one there as well. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn, P Addict Recovery. You'll find me in all of those places. So once again, thank you, and I will open it up for questions if anybody has any about this topic.
It's very interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah, Charlotte, she just left a chat that she had to leave, but she says, wonderful talk, and thank you for coming and saying here. What is the name of your book?
My first book is called The Addiction Nobody Will Talk About. That book really traces the last 5 years of my addiction. It does go talk about what happened to me as a kid, and it does talk about different attitudes and growing up as an addict, but it really looks at the last 5 years of my collapse. My second book that I co-wrote with a therapist, specifically for partners of porn addicts, that one's called He's a Porn Addict, Now What? An expert and a former addict answer your questions. That's very straightforward. We took the 65 most commonly asked questions of partners or of female partners of male addicts, and we just answered them from a clinical point of view and from the guy who's been their point of view. And then last year, in September, I think it was, my most recent book came out. That one was called Porn in the Pandemic, How 3 Months in 2020 Changed Everything. And that was a look at how the pandemic was probably the greatest thing for the online pornography world that ever could have happened. It packed into, and it's still doing it, but it packed into the first 3 months what the pornography industry couldn't have done in 10 years otherwise. It's amazing how much that industry changed and grew and evolved in 2020. That one, like I said, Porn in the Pandemic, all of them are available in all the various, hardcover, softcover, Kindle, all that, through Amazon, through a lot of other retailers. Then they are also available in a lot of libraries. I think between the three books, they're in about 1,000 libraries across the country. So you can always look them up in your local library that way. And so, and if there's anything, I also do very regularly on my website write articles. Some of them are very research-based when I find something interesting happening or a new study comes out. Some of them are just stories about my addiction, and some of them are stories about my recovery because it is a full journey. But I think you need both information and you need to talk to somebody who has also been there. There is, it's a tough thing for people to talk about. That's why so many don't go get help. But, it is a health problem. It is a disease of the mind. Is it a disease of our own making? Sure, all addiction is. I can't believe that anybody under 60 years old doesn't know that smoking is bad. Any 18-year-old or 17-year-old who picked up a cigarette for the first time today knows it's bad for them, but they're doing it anyway. That's true of just about every addiction out there, unfortunately. And I just believe that that if you look at cigarette statistics, they've dropped over the years because of education. We're never going to get rid of pornography. That's not my mission. My mission is about education. We need to let our children know that, hey, this is a substance like alcohol, like cigarettes. in most cases, parents will want to add, this is a substance that I don't want you to use when you live at my house. I don't want you to look at it here because it can be dangerous for you. It can be addictive. It can cause health problems. It can cause physical, mental, emotional health problems. When you're 18 years old, when you're not living here, you can make your own decisions just like you will with drinking, just like you will with cigarettes. But while you live here, there is the potential of it not to be healthy for you, so I don't want you looking at that. That speech doesn't happen in homes. I believe if that speech happened, we would lose 10% of our addicts overnight. But parents don't want to even say the word pornography out loud. They would rather just put some kind of filter on their kid's phone, or they would like to lock down their tablet or their laptop. Well, you know what? If you've locked down your kid's phone, congratulations. You have locked down one phone out of the 4.8 billion smartphones in the world. What happens when your 10-year-old kid goes to get on the bus to go to school and their phone may be locked down, but their friend Johnny holds up his phone and shows them the latest garbage that a pornography site put up? What is your son or daughter or grandson or granddaughter? What are they going to say? What are they going to do when presented with pornography? If you don't know, you have not porn-proofed your kids and you have not porn-prepared your kids. We cannot look at filters as a cure-all. Filters are about burying your head in the sand. Filters are about making the parents, grandparents, and authority figures feel better. Because the other thing about filters is kids can get around them. Just like you were better than your parents with technology, I was better than my parents, and my kids are better than me. We cannot make the mistake to think that a 13-year-old cannot run laps around us when it comes to technology. So you either bury your head in the sand, you pretend it doesn't exist, you hope for the best, or you have a discussion with them about it. And I believe that children want to know the right thing to do. I believe that they want guidance. And I believe that simply knowing some facts about what pornography can do to them may cause better decision making in the long run.
Thank you. Any other questions?
That's the long answer to what my books are called.
That's okay. I think our time's about running out.
Yes. You want to do the 4-way test?
Yes.
So this is the 4-way test of the things we think, say, and do. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? And is it fun? That's our 5th one. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Actually, in 2 weeks, I'm going to be in Disneyland, so I probably won't be.
Yes, you will. There's time.
I'm not promising.
You know what? If you're on the teacups doing this, that is literally a Rotary meeting.
I'm not going to commit. I'll just see what happens. But if I'm not there, you'll know where I am.
We attended a Rotary meeting when we were in Disney in Orlando.
Yes.
Okay, I'm booked again for next January.
So we'll see you.
Yes.
Okay. Well, goodbye, everyone. See you hopefully in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Joshua. Great presentation.